Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get pre-orders of all the upcoming Force of Will sets, as well as releases of previous sets after they come out. TCGPrime.com with over 100,000 Force of Will singles, as well as out-of-print boxes from the past, and TCG accessories, as well as FowlLibrary.com, a wonderful resource for deck lists, article discussions, and more. Check them out at FowlLibrary.com, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer patrons Shukong Fu, Vite Ramen, and Maxime Van He. Thank you for your support. Class is in session.
Hello, welcome back to the Force of Will Yearbook with yours truly, Paul. And today we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 Void cards you should probably be picking up if you want to play in Wanderer this August. Little did I know that when I started this series that we'd be going into just a fully eternal format with Force of Will. So one of my favorite attributes in the game is actually Void. And you can see we have 10 today because there's not a lot of Void cards actually in the game, but we will get started right now. So the first of the Void cards that I want to talk about today is number 10, Shakespeare. Now, Shakespeare is on this list for a variety of reasons, not just for Wanderer, but it's one of those cards that when you play it, you look at the top card of your Magic Stone deck, and if it doesn't share a name with any of the others that you have on the field, you put it into play. This card is amazing for epic stories, for Genesis format, honestly, we have new stuff right now with Magic Stone Institute, Ultra Magic Stone Golem, where this card might actually see some usage if you're trying to play 10 different magic stones to get the most out of their effect. So we thought number 10 probably should go to Shakespeare, although I'm definitely open to taking that off if y'all have a better idea, but I thought Shakespeare was so useful even outside of the Wanderer format that we put it at number 10. Next up we have Yggdrasil, Heroic Spirit of the World Tree. This came out at the very end of Alice Origins Cluster, and the reason this card is so good is that it not only searches you a regalia on your following turn, it allows you to tap for any will you need in order to play that regalia. We have a ton of regalia in the game right now. You can play pretty much anything that isn't void, and who knows, we might see even more regalia in the future. So this card is a staple for any of the Alice Origins rulers, or if you're just looking to put some different regalia into your list. We've seen regalia of the attributed variety make it into some of our competitive decks, and now you have access to all of them again. So you might want to pick up some Yggdrasils. I imagine they're relatively cheap if you don't want the promos. That being said, number 8 for us is going to be Genesis. Let me just change this real quick to make sense of things, right? So Genesis is one of the free regalia that we have in the game. If your ruler is not Magnet, it will come in tapped. However, we do have a lot of Mage Arts and Sword Arts in the game, as well as Strangers that are in the pocket of Alice Origins. We might see those in the future. We might see additional support for that kind of stuff. So Genesis is going to be really useful for you out there if you want to sort of splash it into a deck as like a 1 or a 2 of to get the most out of your Sword Arts and your Mage Arts specifically. It's also, again, it's free, so it gives you access to things like Ruler's Memoria, which will be the case for a lot of the regalia on this list. But when we thought of this, we said, Genesis, super helpful. Next up we have Optical Camouflage. Optical Camouflage is just very splashable in terms of its applications, right? This was most used with Feasting because Feasting could produce Void Will, but Optical Camouflage is basically a very splashable removal option if you want to bounce a Resonator on your opponent's field back to their hand. And it does have quick cast, and it can be stopped by Girion. So if you're just looking for something to fill that void, haha, see, there's jokes in this one. You can just play Optical Camouflage. It's our number 7 pick. Next up, we have Togusa, the Competent Investigator. Probably one of my favorite Void cards of all time, personally, because this thing, again, just like Optical Camouflage and Void cards in general, you can just splash this into any deck. This card has been used in the past for Oborozuki decks, because then you can place things on the top of the deck that have a lot of mana cost associated with them, and then you can reveal them with Oborozuki's effect to kind of get her engine going. That's just one example of how to use this card, but really it's like a Percival that you can slot into any deck to look for any of the top 3 cards and rearrange them however you want. And for that reason, he's incredibly competent as a Void card. Next up we have Kusanagi Matoko the Major. And there's a few Kusanagi cards that are here on this list. But one of the things that is so incredibly important about this card is it not only lets you look at your opponent's hand when you dive it, when it enters, it pretty much prohibits your opponent from playing that card. So if you're able to look in your opponent's hand and then play this card on a future turn, you're able to kind of get around some of those funky things. Plus, she's a machine, so you have a ton of machine support coming out, not only in dual cluster, but there's a ton of machine support in legacy sets as well. So this card goes really well in those kinds of decks. But the fact that she is just so apt at looking at your opponent's hand and just saying no, she has a lot of combo potential with things like Glint of Insight. So take a look at Kusanagi Matoko the Major. Pick her up now before she gets crazy expensive. That's all I'm gonna say. But we're gonna move on right now. So we're gonna be looking at next Excalibur, the God Sword. So this is already seeing play in the new Alice Order Ruler deck because it produces white, it gives you precision, it makes your ruler, your J ruler, imperishable, which is really, really helpful, especially if you're not running an order deck. And then you can discard it to produce white, which last time I checked, anything in this game that allows you to basically just produce will with extra copies, that's probably a good card. So think about that. That's actually really great. Just being able to pitch this card to produce a mana to play additional plays. You can see why the Alice deck runs it. So this card is at our number 4 spot. Up next is a card that I think is slightly better than Excalibur, and that is Hydromonica. Heavenly Instrument Hydromonica, super awesome card for Shion decks, which, you know, I do like my Shion decks, but this card in particular is really good too, because if you have extras in your hand, you can pitch them to replace themselves essentially with another card. In addition to that, though, it essentially just tutors out any card you want on your opponent's turn and puts it on the top of the deck for you to draw on your turn. And I think getting pieces that help you to out your opponent's board is probably a little more useful than mana, because you can build your deck in such a way that you can just have like 1-ofs or 2-ofs that you can tutor out of the deck very quickly if you happen to have Hydromonica. Or if you are using Priscia Seeker of Friends / Priscia's Big Show, this card is really good for taking those 4C cards that you put on the top of the deck and putting them at the bottom, or even just looking at more cards. So this card has got some applications, and especially in Shion, it's only it's a 1-cost tutor for anything in your deck, which I think is really, really, really good. So that's Hydromonica at number 3. Next up, we have Kusanagi Matoko. And this Matoko is a ridiculously good machine resonator. It is 7 costs, but we have ways to get around that in the game. But she's a 14/14, and she has like every symbol skill in the game outside of like Eternal and I think Barrier. I think she might actually have Barrier. She has pretty much all of them, and she can't be canceled. In a game where we're only going to be getting more cancels as the game goes on, this is one of those boss monsters that could be really, really, really helpful for you out there if you decide that you just need some sort of really big, non-cancelable entity that can do damage. This card is pretty high up there on my list. So Kusanagi Motoko, an amazing boss card in any deck that can run her efficiently. Last but not least, we have Deathscythe. So if you don't know what Deathscythe is, Deathscythe the Life Reaper is the free version of the Deathscythe we got in Alice Origins. So this card takes away swiftness and imperishable from your opponent's J-Ruler, and then you can tap it to give your J-Ruler +2/+2. To get it back in your hand, though, all you have to do is remove 3 cards from your graveyard to put it back in your hand. This card, in combination with Tea Party, essentially made them change the ruling of Tea Party and the text of Tea Party ever so slightly, so you couldn't just simply abuse Tea Party with this card. That's how good it is. But I would also say there's tons of decks that really benefit from you having things removed from the graveyard so that you can put this back in your hand. I think specifically Treat 2 is really good for that reason. If any deck that can run Healing Robot is also really good, and that's why we put it at number 1. However, we are going to take a quick trip over to Force of Wind because for some reason I forgot to put in Horn of the Sacred Beast. Now this card, okay, Horn Sacred Beasts, excuse me. This card is by far, let me just make sure this is in frame for you all. This card in general is probably the best Regalia ever printed. It just came off the ban list a few ban lists ago. This card is absolutely, fundamentally, probably the best Void card ever printed, besides Deathscythe. So if I were to include this on the list, it would definitely be at number 1 or just at number 0 because it's just that good. It's like SS plus tier. So why is this card so good? You banish it and you can shuffle target player, so your opponent is included in that, their entire graveyard back into their deck and or Magic Stone deck. So if you have Magic Stones, you can put those back into your Stone deck. I'm thinking of Gruz Ballesta specifically, and maybe some other cards like a Nyarlathotep deck or any deck that uses Isis. The Resonator that banishes your Magic Stones. This card is really good for that. It's really good for Treat 2. Any control deck like Kaguya, this card is just so applicable in so many different ways. And then, of course, it gives you the +2/+2 for your J-Ruler, which is amazing. It also is great because I like my pet decks. You all know I love my pet decks. The original Prisia Ruler, the commander of Sacred Beasts, could gain Imperishable off this card, and it makes all of your 4 Sacred Beast cards a little bit cheaper. So it's nice that that deck actually has its main utility card in it once again. But guys, for sure, I give you a little bit of a bonus card in this video. Let me know what you think of this list down in the comment section down below. Are there void cards that I missed? Are there things you think I should have put in the list? Or something that you think I should take off the list? Let me know down in the comment section down below. There's always a little bit of a different opinion, especially on that number 10 card. So let me know what you think. This has been Paul, and I'll catch you in the next one.